The biggest lie of modern feminism has been its stated goal to overthrow traditional gender roles for both men and women, even while it exhibits a near complete reliance on traditional masculine qualities amongst men of chivalric restraint, deference, and self-sacrifice for women. Over the past month, two expressions of anti-male viciousness by women highlighted this cultural hoodwink, though countless other examples might have been chosen. In late September 2019, an Egyptian-American feminist activist named Mona El-Tahawi must have surprised many when, in an interview with Canada's state broadcaster, she declared that the time for female politeness and civility towards men was over. Many of us thought it ended a long time ago. But she went further to claim that girls and women should enact what she called, quote, justifiable violence. And barely able to contain her glee, she outlined a sordid fantasy of vigilante attacks in which, quote, a certain number of men, end quote, would be killed every week until the so-called patriarchy would cease its so-called war on women. In another example, on October 7th, 2019, a trustee in the Chicago suburb of Oak Park took evident teeth-baring, table-pounding satisfaction in berating her white male colleagues who had dared to question the phrase systems of oppression in a diversity statement being discussed by the Oak Park Village Board of Trustees. And not once, not twice, but repeatedly, Trustee Susan Buchanan, unable to contain her rage, declared that white men who had supposedly not experienced systems of oppression had no right to speak during the board's deliberations.
And you stop it! You are a white male! Stop it! You are a white male! Your skin is light enough! Stop it!
I think if we reduce these conversations to nobody cares what you have to say because you're a white male, I don't think we're doing this right.
Both of these women were, to say the least, highly aggressive and insulting in their statements about men. Yet both also fully expected, and were not mistaken in their expectation, that they would be allowed to express their hatred and insults unimpeded, unharassed, and unharmed, even almost unchallenged. They did not fear violence. In fact, so secure were they that one wonders whether they were in fact taunting men and attempting to provoke a verbal lashing out, perhaps out of an unconscious need to be restrained. Any such actual lashing out would, of course, be turned to their further advantage as supposed evidence of the white supremacist patriarchy. Women such as these, elite upper-class women who live lives of once unimaginable comfort and plenty as a result of the labors and inventions of men, express their hatred and contempt for men openly, knowing that they will be allowed to do so and even applauded for it. Moreover, many feminists explicitly demand changes in the behavior of men that if the men were anything like what feminists claim, it would be worse than useless to expect because very few or no men at all would be capable of making the changes. When Susanna Walters published her crazed op-ed piece in the Washington Post titled "Why Can't We Hate Men?", she spent half of the article explaining why men, not just some men, but men as a class, are rightly to be despised, and the second half calling on these same men to sacrifice their own interests to advance women, in order that they not be hated quite so much, though one would think that men as morally deficient as Walters had declared men to be wouldn't care whether women hated them or not. Feminists make their presumptuous demands and slanderous statements in full knowledge that similar insult-based demands in the past have been enthusiastically embraced by male legislators, pundits, and policymakers, and in full expectation that they will be met again. This hypocrisy is part of a decades-old strategy that may not be fully conscious or articulated, but is nonetheless discernible to a sane observer. It aims at nothing less than the total remaking of relations between men and women, though not at all in the manner that feminists claim, having nothing to do with equality, fairness, or justice, and involving the complete destruction of the gender contract. All societies have operated according to a gender contract, though these have varied over time, and all successful ones involve some form of reciprocity and mutual recognition of male and female contributions. Traditionally, Western societies developed complementary roles for men and women that fit their biological capacities and tendencies. Men took on the roles of hunter, protector, defender, warrior, trader, harvester, leader, and lawmaker, and women took on the roles of life giver, gatherer, nurturer, sexual companion, healer, advisor, and homemaker. At different times, men and women shared the roles of teacher, scribe, and visionary. Women's contributions were affirmed and celebrated in the West. Now, feminists insist on an entirely new gender order without reciprocity. Women must no longer be confined to traditional roles. They are to be not only allowed, but assisted, applauded, and promoted in any formerly male domains that they wish to enter. Note that last clause, that they wish to enter. There are various male spheres that women have not wished to enter and have not entered, and there are a few masculine roles, some of the most traditional actually, those of protector, defender, and warrior, that while coveting in the abstract, women have not taken on. But the new gender order that feminists are bringing about with some initial success is perhaps unique in world history in entirely refusing reciprocity and mutual recognition. Yes, men are to recognize female achievements, and most men are happy to do so. Men are also to continually seek to aid women in their endeavors, defer to women, come to women's defense, put women first, sacrifice for women, even die for women if necessary. This is an almost universally acknowledged social goal in the West, and many men are prepared to do it. But women do not recognize male achievement and are not exhorted, and don't seem willing, to aid men in their endeavors, quite the opposite. Women are certainly not expected to sacrifice their lives, their careers, or their desires for men. They are not expected to offer emotional support, verbal advocacy, or financial assistance. It would be considered the height of sexism if women were expected to offer their sexuality, beauty, and childbearing capacity to men. What about basic kindness, empathy, gratitude? No, no, and no. In fact, the denial of reciprocity and recognition is so total that in the new gender order, even the basic fact of men's contribution to society is almost completely ignored, as if it didn't exist. How has this come about? We already know that feminist activists and academics, aided and abetted by the feminist media and public culture, have rewritten the past as a story of male domination of women, and that alone. It's more tricky to deny men's present contributions and sacrifices, whether in war, in killing work, or in personal valor, as we see these all around us. But this is done too, with the complicity of journalists, broadcasters, teachers, and Hollywood, often simply through avoidance and silence, or through belittling or recasting male contributions as irritations or forms of sexism. As fathers are exiled from the home more and more, and men are exiled from public school classrooms, both boys and girls are taught a woman-centered perspective that erases the significance of maleness and masculine identity. When feminism refers to gender parity in the workplace, it sets its sights on the corner office in the law firm, or the CEO position in the high-tech company, or the president's desk in the Oval Office. It doesn't see the men who work at night removing trash, cleaning toilets, maintaining the sewage treatment system, repairing the roads, working in the mines, operating the heavy machinery, fixing broken equipment, and so on. It never mentions the gender disparities in prison incarceration, homelessness, addiction, suicide, or social neglect. Or it claims It never wanted such things, or blames them on men themselves, or pretends that women sacrifice more in the domain of emotional labor that we hear so much about lately. Feminism thus seeks and is achieving a social order in which nothing at all is seen to be owed to men as men, and everything is owed to women, not for their specific contributions to society, but simply for existing. And no matter the number of pro-female government programs, wealth transfer schemes, anti-male initiatives, gynocentric laws, and celebrations of female supremacy, the female sex continually demands more, complaining that nothing whatsoever has been done for them, often claiming, in fact, that things have never been worse, or that what has been done is far too little, or that what has been done simply contributed to male advantage, or was done in bad faith, or was done with inadequate results, or created unforeseen problems for women that must now be rectified. Boys are taught that they must continually attempt to make amends for past wrongdoing, even though such wrongdoing was either so far in the past as to be irrelevant to the present, or never existed in the way described. In the new order, the female sex denies not only that men contribute to society, but even that they are necessary at all the while relying without thanks on male labor, male inventiveness, male technical know-how, and male decency and forbearance. Even women who like men, or at least bear no animosity towards them, have been encouraged to believe that such unequal treatment is necessary to correct the injustice of the past, which we all believe in without knowing much about it. Men, whether because of weaker in-group preference, or out of competition with other men, or out of self-serving opportunism, or because of innate chivalric impulse, or because they've been working too much to pay attention, have allowed all this to happen with relatively little resistance. The good news is that the situation can't last forever. Societies lacking appropriate recognition and reciprocity tend to collapse of their own dysfunction as the exploited group gradually becomes alienated, removes its labor, seeks oblivion in hedonism and or self-harm, or resorts to violence directed outward or against the self. The group refusing recognition becomes so mired in its delusions that it is increasingly unable to comprehend or deal with reality and exhibits symptoms of anxiety, hysteria, and nihilistic destruction. Unfortunately, the bad news is that once a society has reached this point, rebalancing of the gender order becomes very difficult, and total social breakdown becomes a frightening possibility. Then we will see violence against women, and we will all be caught in the maelstrom.